I'm pausing here because I could feel like when I know the parts of your story where you're meeting the Gray and meeting the Reptilian as your first, as Robert, your XO, is kind of he's grooming you a little bit. He's wooing you into the SSP to sign papers to get you into this program. Like, did you feel you had a choice to say no at this point in the journey?
No, because that's the thing. Like I said, the older ETs can go back in time and they can kind of manipulate you and manipulate things. And
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that whole thing with the aura and seeing the Nordic people, I think it was almost like I had already joined it as far as they were concerned. I was already there with them.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome, Daryl James, to another episode of Starseed Speaks. My guest, Daryl, and I met a couple of years ago at the space conference in Grafton. So thanks all for joining us, and thanks, Daryl, for coming in to share your story with us. Really happy to have you here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, Rebecca. Thank you for having me here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, wow, it's there's so much to your story. And to mine both. And I know for both of us, probably we can get a little tired of reiterating the same details. But I might ask you to do a little recap for people who are not familiar with your amazing journey through the SSP and the events that surround that are so you have a lot of detail in your story. It's really incredible. And yeah, I want to just look at your bio for a second to remind people of like sort of the timeline here. You enlisted in the Navy, US Navy in 99, and served for 7 years, including a year in Iraq. So then this all happened in 2004 while you were stationed at the Royal Air Force Base at St. Mawgan in Cornwall, in the UK. You passed through what you thought was a metal detector, and it was a piece of technology that measured every biometric signature that you had, including IQ. And soon after, you were recruited to join the SSP, guaranteed a position as a pilot in Solar Warden, the Starfleet that monitors our solar system. After a miscommunication with a 9.5-foot tall reptilian, I was sent to the mines on the moon. Um, I know there's a lot more going on here. I'm curious, before we dive deeper into that part of, that jumping off point, if you had any, do you recall any ET or paranormal phenomena in your early life, Daryl?
I mean, in my early life, uh, I had a dream as a kid that, I mean, this is probably the first dream I could remember. And there were some Jehovah's Witness ladies that came. I was playing out in we had a small ditch in the front yard, and it just got done raining, and I was playing out in the small ditch. I think I was 4, and these Jehovah Witness ladies came up to me, and they said something like, do you want to be thrown into the lake of fire or the fiery pits of hell or something? And I've never heard of hell before.
Oh
Like,
no. Oh no.
like we didn't go to church or anything, so I had no idea that this was like a belief, a concept. Like, I was only 4. And
Yeah,
I got really like it scared me to think about it, like
for
this
sure.
something
Yeah.
like this could happen. So I had this dream. I think probably that night or the next night where I thought there was like an angel in front of me, and
Oh.
I was asking him like, am I going to hell? And I was crying. I was like very scared. He
Oh.
smiled, said, "No, I'm not. You're not going to hell." But I mean, that was just like and he, you know, looked similar to, like a Pleiadian man, like long blonde hair and blue eyes. So it almost felt like to me that was like one of the first things, the
Yeah.
first kind of contacts. And then when I was 11, my sister had a friend named Jen, and I found out later that like Jen's dad was a high-ranking like Italian mobster
Oh,
in New York, and he was living in Pinellas Park, Florida, for a while.
wow.
And his wife was a Kabbalist, and took me to her house during like for a slumber party, and I was kind of like the mascot of like my sister's friends, and like so I came along too because Jen wanted me to go. Her friend Jen, because well we used to speak telepathically to her, like my father and we would speak telepathically, and Jen can do it as well, and so she liked us in that sense, and because that was another one of my like early memories as a kid is my father sitting down next to me on the couch while I was watching cartoons or something and saying, "Hey,
Mm,
do you think
mm.
you'll be able to do this when you get older?" As your sister got older, she forgot. Do you think you'll remember? Yeah, Dad, I'll remember. And then he said, like, if you can remember how to do this as you become older, you'll be able to see your future and the future of others.
Hmm. Hmm. And he was meaning, Daryl, he was meaning telepathic communication, to clarify. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like if you can remember how to keep doing this, because
Yeah.
I think most children know how to do it, and if their parents know how to do it, then they can hold on to it. But I
Yeah.
think most kids probably have that ability, in my own opinion.
Yes, absolutely. So true.
And yeah, and it's just as difficulties in life take place, a lot of people will forget, even if they knew how to do it when they were younger. And yeah, so we would talk to Jen like that, and she invited me over to this Halloween party. It was my sister's birthday, and she immediately grabbed my arm and pulled me into her mom's bedroom. And her mom was getting ready for a Halloween party. She was in front of like the mirror, the dresser mirror, and she looked like a combination between like Elvira and like a like Vampira kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
she's like, kind of like a combination of that.
Yeah, I just had that flash in my mind. That's, yeah, stunning.
So it was kind of scary, to begin
Yeah.
with, because I'm only 11 and there's this tall woman, and she's putting all this makeup on and she has on like this dress and everything like that. And she said to Jen, "Is this him?" And Jen said, "Yes." And it was like telepathic. And she said, "And you say his father can do it?" And she said, "Yes." "What about the mother?" She said, "Not as much." And she said, and the sister?" And she said, "No." And she kind of grabbed my chin. I was a little kid. She grabbed my chin and lifted my head up, and she like locked eyes with me. And I
Mm.
remember like the whole room kind of engulfed in like orange and red, and like it all turned orange and like red and like flecks of blue kind of coming around. And I remember the girls started screaming outside, some of them, and I could see like Nordic people kind of. I could see her eyes and all this color, and then I kind of saw like Nordic people in the background and like Pleiadian, and she shook my chin, and I kind of snapped out of it, and she said, "You're a powerful little boy, don't you?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Good, now go play."
Mm.
And then I went out, and the girls were like screaming and things like that, or they're talking about it. My sister said she didn't see it, but the other girls saw it, who were out in like the TV room. And the next day, the mother wanted to talk to me. She said, "Jen, why don't you go play out back with the girls? I want to talk to Daryl." And they went out, and we began to speak. And she was just basically like, saying, "Do you like Jen?" and things like that. And she was trying to almost, it seemed like to me, like get me to like marry Jen in the future is what it seemed like. It seemed like whatever I had, she wanted. And she said, like, "I did something to you, and I'm not sure what it is, but I can help you." And so whatever that was, where it felt like my aura or whatever was like kind of blowing up. Um, she did something to me on accident, but I think it was also them as well, like Pleiadian.
Hmm.
She asked me to like marry her daughter, and I
Wow.
remember her husband had a
And
like
you're
a
like
car.
11. At this point, Daryl, you're
I was
11 years old.
11, yeah, I
Right,
was
right. Like
11,
just reminding people you're 11 years old. Okay.
yeah, yeah. And Jen was like, I don't know, 14, maybe 15. I think she was like 15, and I was like 11. And yeah, I think I think she had a lot to do with like she believed in a lot of like bloodlines or whatever. I think she had like kind of this Kabbalist kind of
Yeah.
you know, dabbling in whatever you want to call this magic or something, Kabbalist magic. I think she had a strong belief in that. And there was a car sitting on like the shelf. And I said, "Can I look at your, you know, your car?" She said, "Yes." And I picked it up. And I said, "This was your husband had a car like this. I think it was like a 69 vet." And she said he did. And I said, "He wants another." And she said, "He does." And I remember looking at the husband and I said, "Your husband hurts people." And she said, "You know, he does it for his family."
Okay. So yeah, we're getting into a deeper bloodline story here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And because, you know, he was Italian mafia. I really didn't know what that meant at the time, but it was kind of like I could, if I was in someone's presence, I could look down their timelines, is how ETs put it. Like look into their future. Only older ETs can see the past. Like older ETs can go back in time in your timeline, like 2,000 years, kind of, sort of. They live over, a lot of ETs live over 3,000 years.
Yeah.
Once you get to around 2,000, they can go in reverse in your timeline. But I could still see, you know, his regrets of his memories in the future.
Hmm.
And she kept on bringing up about her daughter and things like that, wanting to marry her daughter. And you know, and so I decided, like, what if I went down that path? Like, what would happen? That kind of like went into my mind. Like, what if I went down?
Yeah. So how do you connect that with like the everything that came after in the SSP and Aquino and all of these things like that element of like bloodline stuff and the cabal and
Well, I connect it like this. When I was getting out, the executive officer, his first name was Robert. He was trying to get me to go back into the chair, which is like a density chamber chair,
hmm
because it artificially pushes you up from. We're in third density, and the ETs that the military works with are in fifth, so they're much too fast for us. He was wearing a belt. You know, I made him show it to me. It was under his uniform. He pulled his uniform up, and like over top of his undershirt, he had kind of like this black. It looked like electrical tape, but it was about this thick, like over his
hmm.
waist. And he said that was the only way that he could actually kind of be in third density, even though he was still fifth, because he was naturally in fifth density. He told me he was from the year 25 to 80. That the timelines got screwed up, and they had to go back in time, and they had to fix the timelines. And he said if you saw me in fifth density, if I took this belt off, I would just look like a split second of like a flash of light to
A
you.
flash of light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it would
Yeah.
just like I'd be like, you know, it's so much different than people really understand the way where ETs are and things like that. And I asked him to take the belt off, and he said no. And I said why? He said it makes you kind of nauseous. Like he didn't want to do it, like kind of going back and
Going
forth.
back and forth wouldn't feel good. I mean, it just
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
feel good. For sure it wouldn't feel good. So, okay. So,
And the way this applies is he realized that whatever that woman did to me with the whole aura and everything like that, that's what put me. He said you're still partially in fifth density. Something went wrong with the chair. And as he looked down my timeline, he began to discover that I discovered that whatever she did to me, that's what put me in partial fifth density. And it felt like that. It felt like I was like hallucinating. It felt like I could see shadow beings. It felt like I don't know, like colors went up. It felt like a hallucination as like 11-year-old, and it lasted for years. And I don't think I ever got rid of it. I think I just got used to it. I think I
yeah.
just got
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
kind of an
Yeah.
entire partially anyway.
Yeah. So I could see the corollary between, that blazing experience at age 11, which is still so clear and vivid and which never really quite faded. Like that just did something to you at an energetic level. Yeah. So again, we're going to take people back kind of because some folks who maybe, I know a lot of people know your story, but maybe like we'll go back into like the jumping off point at St. Mawgan's in 2004. And I always find this really interesting because you and I have some crossover in our experiences, and yet you're 22 years on from when I was taken in the fall of 82, when I was not quite 10 years old. So interesting to me, the different the generations of SSP, so to speak, and the different iterations of technology that were being used from there to there, even though in 22 Earth years, that's really the blink of an eye. But let's go back to I think it was, am I correct to say that it was looking glass technology that actually propelled you from Mawgan's onward into
The Minds of
space?
the Moon.
Yeah, was it the Mines of the Moon? I maybe tell me about that. The looking glass technology sent you somewhere, is that correct?
Yes, yes, and that's kind of like what the moon is for in a sense. It's kind of like a jumping off point. That way they could just take off ships on the dark side of the moon and things like that. That way you don't
Yeah.
really see ships or anything like that taking off from Earth. So that's what was explained to me by the executive officer. Yeah, it was. I said, well, how did I get to the moon? And he said through the looking glass. Is how he explained it to me.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
explained it to me. It was like a kind of like a portal, but you could also go in different moments. You can go back in time and forward in time, depending on where you are. If you're in the present, and that's the present, kind of like how it works. You can go back in time, and nothing really changes unless somebody goes back in time and changes the timeline. Unless like somebody goes back in time and screws things up. But if you're going from where you're at in the present forward in time, he explained it was a 94% accuracy with a 4% different outcome and a 2% variable. And so it's accurate within 94% as far as where you're at in the present going into the future. It has a 94% accuracy. So you can actually observe different moments in time through the looking glass. You can go back
Mm-hmm.
in time and you can look at the Civil War. You can go forward in time and look at, just look into the future, or you
Mm-hmm.
could step through the looking glass. So that's kind of like how he
I
explained it.
see. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that a little bit because it can be a little like swimmy in one's mind of like, okay, I kind of get the general gist, but what is it actually? And so this was actually at Mawgan's at the base, right?
Yeah,
Underground.
yeah. This was underground. Yeah, this was, and it was below where the guys actually worked. As far as the people on base thought they thought it was for submarine kind of detecting different, Russian and North Korean and Chinese subs in the Arctic Circle. That's kind of like what the cover story for of it was, but it was actually for things like, getting people into the programs because we have a contract with ETs that we have to give them so many people every year
Yeah.
to do with like the technology they give us. And it was also for like, like adrenochrome harvesting and things like that.
So,
So it's used for that as well. There's like caverns below the underground base. There's like caves, ancient
oh, the
caves.
base
And even
itself.
the earth
Okay.
is honey
Yeah, yeah.
caves.
Okay. I
That's what
was
they were.
connecting okay. The base was connected to the production of adrenochrome. Am I reading
Yeah,
it?
that's what it's
Okay.
actually used. That's what all underground bases are actually used is for
Mm-hmm.
like these secret space programs to like recruiting centers almost for them and adrenochrome harvest. That's what they're actually for.
Yeah, when I was underground before I was twinned at the Great Lakes Naval Station north of Chicago. I was twinned and sent to Mars, and we were definitely kept in cages there. And there was a lot of, I can corroborate what you're saying about the adrenochrome harvesting and all the insidious or um, nefarious activities going on there. So, yeah, thanks for sharing about that. Wow, and you had no idea. Like, did you? I mean. I'm pausing here because I could feel like when I know the parts of your story where you're meeting the Gray and meeting the Reptilian as your first as Robert, your XO, is kind of he's grooming you a little bit. He's wooing you into the SSP to sign papers to get you into this program. Like, did you feel you had a choice to say no at this point in the journey?
No, because that's the thing. Like I said, the older ETs can go back in time and they can kind of manipulate you and manipulate things. And
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that whole thing with the aura and seeing the Nordic people, I think it was almost like I had already joined it as far as they were concerned. I was already there with them.
Right, right, right. When I listen to your other
So that,
interviews, that's the feeling I get as well. Well, they gave me papers to sign, but in fact, this was already planned out before you even probably came in. I mean, do you have a sense of that too? Like there was some sort of destiny that you had to end up there anyway.
I mean, yeah, it's destiny and protection as well. Because I remember the first class petty officer who it wasn't Robert I talked to initially. It was a first class petty officer. After I walked through the scanner, they called it, which looked like the metal detector. He talked to me and he said, like, he told me I had a high IQ. He said, with your scores, you'll be able to become a pilot. You'll make officer is what he said. You'll make officer. And then he said, like, were you homeschooled? And I said, no. And he said, well, I guess you just slipped through the cracks. So it almost seemed like they try to pick up people earlier in life. I was 26 at the time. So
Yeah, for sure.
it seemed like I
Yeah.
was under protection of some
Hmm.
sort. Like I
Hmm.
was being protected on some sort of level so that no one got to me in my youth and it waited till I was older.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you say that, I'm like, wow, I'm kind of envious. Like there's so much that happens when you're a kid. It's like, wait, oh, all those terrible things. I mean, I know terrible things happen because you and I have a Kino in common, but yeah. So I mean, you must have felt so fucked up when you were like, okay, there's an ET. There's the first ET you saw at Mawgan's, that little gray.
Yeah, they called it a drone, which
Yes.
is like it has like
Mhm.
a hive mind kind of shared consciousness. It's like
Yep.
a organic machine.
Yes.
It was about, I don't know, 2.5 feet, maybe three, probably 2.5 feet. It was like a light brown, like a light khaki brown, and it had big black eyes, the big head, just like you think. But it had like a fold of skin going from its tear ducts down to cheekbones, and it had very long fingers to the point, and palms were very long to the point where it had to kind of hold its hands in C shapes when it walked. And it took
Hmm.
apart like a Dell computer in front of me, like a machine, like in 8 seconds. It was able to take all the screws out, and it had like a small little drill, and it was just catching all the screws, and it took the top off, popped out 2 gigs of RAM, put two more in, slid it back on. It was able to like flick its wrist and kind of set a screw in between its fingers and just put it back together almost as quickly as it took it apart. And then yeah, then they just let me. I just kind of observed it. And I was
Hmm.
looking at it, and it moved its head back and forth for me. And when I saw its hands, it moved its hands. And then it walked away. It went back in the underground base. And the first class petty officer said, "Do you think you could work around something like that?" I said, "I don't see why not." And then yeah, and then that's when he started telling me all these different things about my Q score and everything else.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And what a different inception to the SSP. So Robert, your XO, is an ET embodied in the military, and he's the one giving you all this information. Is that right?
Well, he's not an ET. He came from the year 2580.
Okay.
He explained to me, and well, when he was looking down my timeline, because when I was in his, it was before I was getting out of the Navy. It's like you get to see the Master Chief of the base, who was an off-world German, is what they call them. And then you get to see executive officer, and then you get to see the commanding officer. So when I saw him, he was the executive officer, the second in command.
Hmm.
He explained to me, like he just started telling me everything, like everything. And
Why do you think he gave you so much information? Like why do you feel like he was so forthcoming with all the details, which is I feel kind of unusual. It's like need to know basis, and that's that, usually.
well, he was doing it telepathically. He told
Okay.
me that we couldn't say it out loud. I said, I want this to be more real because I kind of forgot that I knew how to do that because it was just as I got older, it was just, you meet less
Yeah.
and less people that know how to do it. So I just stopped doing it.
Hmm.
And he said that the master chief and the commanding officer were listening in on the speakerphone, is
Hmm.
what he said to me. So everything had to be telepathic. But he said that most people who join the program commit suicide if they have memories of the 20-year and back, they commit suicide within the first 6 months.
Hmm.
And as he looked at my timeline, he realized that I wasn't going to go back into the chair, as he put it, to have my mind rewiped. So he just kind of, I think he was trying to like let me know that this was real, that this happened to you, that this is going to be your future outcome, in the sense that so I wouldn't think it was just something I was making up and hallucinating,
Yeah.
and to give me a chance to where I wouldn't take my own life because he felt like he said I was like a son to him. He felt like a lot of guilt. He knew me in the programs. He was forced to kind of participate in my torture and everything like that when I came back from the 20-year and back.
Okay, so yeah, okay, okay, okay.
So he felt like a lot of guilt, and
Wow.
yeah, I think that's what it was. I think he wanted to let me know that this was real, that this actually happened to you, and this wasn't
Yeah,
just something making up.
yeah, yeah.
As he said, your memories are going to come back in real time, is how he put it, which meant like as the me up there is creating memories or making new memories, the me down here remembers it. So I remember the very beginning and I remember the very end, but
Yeah.
everything in the middle was kind of like a blank. And I kind of get new memories every now and again as
Hmm.
time goes on.
Yeah, yeah, that's relatable. Yes, that's relatable. So what happened? I know you had the run-in with the reptilian. Is that the point at which you were sent off world for the first time, off of Earth? Was after the kerfuffle and I mean, you got really your ass kicked by this reptilian in a way.
Well, I mean, yeah, he was putting me in the density chamber, and I never saw a reptilian before. I saw the other little gray, like the little drone, but I
Yeah.
didn't know these things existed. Guys in the barracks were kind of telling me things like there's reptiles underground and they talk, and but I really
Mhm.
didn't believe them. And I found out later that it was the command kind of trying to get me like acclimatized to the situation. But yeah, it was like the density chamber was it looked like a gas chamber, and I thought it had the sealed door and everything, and I was told that the watertight door and the chair looked like kind of like a gas had holes in it with straps, and I was told that pressure has to be built up to push you up artificially in the fifth. And you become stronger, faster. Your IQ goes up 200 points, and you become more of a collective. Like when you're in a group, you kind of become that group.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I fought back to get away from it, and yeah, like eventually I poked it in the eye because it got really close to me. It growled and kind of leaned in. I jammed my
Mhm.
thumb in its eye, and then it just like pushed against my chest and kind of collapsed my chest because I was already in the chair, strapped in on one side, and yeah, just pushed against my heart and I passed out. And I was gonna be given. Robert told me that they were gonna give me, I think, probably 40 years in the mines of the moon, which is something like a special punishment. It goes by 20 years, 20, 40. It goes by usually the program 20 and 40, and it's a special punishment for if there's an admiral or if you should do something to one of their kids or something like murder one of their kids, they'll put you like in the mines of the moon and they won't wipe your memory when you come back. And almost all those people, commit suicide.
Oh,
They'll
they would
injure
commit
you and
suicide
they'll
for
put you
sure.
back in
Yeah, absolutely.
line. Yeah.
100. Yes, absolutely. They would go
So that's
insane.
like that's where the predicament I was for poking it in the eye. They were going to give me like 40 years
Hmm.
every.
Hmm. And was that actually how it worked out?
No, it was like a German came up to me, like an off-world German is what the military calls them. It's like a breakaway society of Germans.
Yeah.
And he had like a device and he kind of put it in front of me. And then he started yelling at another German in German. And then he said, "Come with me." And I think the device probably picked up my scores or something. I'm not really sure. It was, because you have to have at least 110 IQ to even work on the moon in the mines. Something about the density shift. Your mind can't take it unless like you're above average intelligence. Unless you're being punishment. They don't care. But yeah, you have to have like at least 110 to be able to like handle the density shift. Period. So I mean, once they figured out I had a higher IQ, they told me I had a 195 IQ when I went through this machine. And once he figured that out, this German figured that out, I got put into like Dark Fleet after that, like which is like the
Hmm.
German kind of mercenary. They're almost like mercs for the reptiles, like the Draconian Empire kind of thing. Is how it
Yes.
seemed.
Yeah, absolutely. I was with the Germans. One of my first assignments of service was abductions, was with the Germans on the moon, working in like an engineering cloning lab, hybrid lab up there with tons of Draco and these exact, very similar, those gray kind of drones that we're talking about here. The little guy that you met, they were all over the the lab. So wow,
They're
so
like
different.
preventive maintenance almost on the ships. I remember, like
Yeah.
repairing things, fixing things. They're kind of running all over the place, like in the
Hmm.
dark.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so so you were sent to the moon, but it worked out differently. After you had the exchange with the big reptilian back at Mawgan's, you end up on the moon, but then what happens?
Well, then I get processed into the Dark Fleet. They put. I remember there was a guy. Looked almost like he was in a hospital outfit. He kind of had a mask on and like a little hood on. He had like the outfit on, like a doctor's outfit you have on like during surgery. And they strapped me down to a table. He showed me a needle. He said, "This is going to be used for your implant." Put it through my skull, put an implant in my brain, and then the table kind of flipped over, and I guess it had a hole in the back because I felt almost like a spinal tap going to my spine, and I felt something cool going into me, and I think that was like the tech they were putting into your body. They put like a once you get like on the side of the reptile, they put like an artificial intelligence kind of tech. I heard people call it black goo and things like that, but it's like an AI kind of. They have the AI, the reptiles, the Germans when they're on duty. When they go back home, they get it removed to their home world. But when they're on duty, they have to have this tech in their body. And yeah, I mean, I did a lot of different things on Mars. I was primarily on Mars when I was, as far as I can remember, when I was in Dark Fleet. and everything.
Yeah. So, at what point, what do you recall anything about training on the moon or any, were you actually doing like punishment in the mines for a little bit or,
Yeah, like I asked Robert about that. I wanted like a timeline, and he
Mhm.
said 3 months in the mines of the moon, 2 years in the Dark Fleet, and then the rest of the time, pretty much he said I was with them. I was with Solar Warden, but I was also with, the Pleiadian.
Mhm. 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 Okay. So do you at what point, because I know you eventually become are you eventually a captain with Solar Warden in a big ship, a huge vessel, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And how do you remember being like trained to pilot, or do you have any recollection of the steps in that at all? Or
Well, I mean, a lot of the advances, and the reason they look for telepaths is because
yes.
it
Hmm.
means you can interact with, they call it advanced ET tech.
Yeah.
And advanced ET tech, you basically create a telepathic link.
Hmm.
And it was called the USSSS Nimitz. But
Hmm.
Robert told me since I was the pilot, I was allowed to nickname the ship, and I nicknamed the ship Mama Bear. And it was actually like a Pleiadian female, like soul, like consciousness that was in the ship that would
Okay.
volunteer
Yeah.
herself for it, for a
Mhm.
certain amount of time. Because positive ETs, they don't like using souls for everything. Like the reptiles use it for everything. The suits you wear, your weapons, everything kind of has a soul trapped in it. But they have like almost like a way to bypass that. But when it comes to like larger like starships, 4 kilometer ships, they need something advanced like artificial intelligence to be able to kind of man that ship to be able to control it. And
Mhm.
I remember it was just like the co-pilot, or he was like the navigator, is what it was. The navigator, who was like a Pleiadian, he was kind of running images in my head. I'm not. I think it was through a smart glass pad. I could see images in my head the first day, and I remember it was, well, no, the first day he used telepathy on me. We were using telepathy. And he just sat down with me all day and kind of realized that this isn't just the voice in your head. This is someone else's thoughts. This is someone else's inner thoughts in your head. So he
Yeah.
practiced me with that for the first day. Second day, he used like a smart glass pad, was kind of putting images in my head that I had to like open up
Mhm.
cubes, put them back around inside out. I had to open spheres. Like I had to open, it was like spatial recognition is what it felt like. It
Mhm.
felt like they were testing my spatial recognition. And then by the third day, I was piloting the ship, and that's how quick it was because it was just a telepathic link. There were two black rectangular panels like on in front of you on the ship whenever you were piloting, and you just put your hands on the ship on these panels. You closed your eyes, you cleared your thoughts, and then I would hear a voice in my head say, "Good morning, Daryl," and I would say, "Good morning, Mama Bear." And then that's how I knew I had a telepathic link with the ship, and that's kind of how it worked. And then you become almost part of the ship.
You become
There
part of
was
the
like
ship.
a
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was like a big smart glass pad on a swing arm for like docking and departing that you would use, and you just push it away. But as far as actually flying the ship, maneuvering the ship, it was almost like your own thoughts were the ship's thoughts, like exactly what you wanted to do was
Yes. Yeah.
like moving
Daryl, I
your
love
arm. It
hearing
wasn't like
you.
running or anything. Yeah, it was just something you didn't even think about. It was part of you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. That it really corroborates my own experience piloting. I mean, I have went through, this was a different era, earlier on in the 80s. So yeah, I went through training as a kid, but it was like working, they trained us how to work with telekinesis. And of course, telepathy had already been well ingrained within us as kids. And then the telekinetic ability to move stuff, and then they would eventually be wetting our consciousness with the craft of whatever was the craft of the hour to pilot on patrol, and then so on and so on and so on into other areas of experience. But I like that. Yeah, that is very resonant for me. Thank you. So at what point are you making interface with the Pleiadians? I mean, I feel from your recollection with, is it Jenny's mom back in childhood? Um, you'd already had, something open up massive. Like, do you feel like a connection with the Pleiadians had already been there for a long time before you got to the SSP?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely, and it was difficult. I mean, it was difficult to kind of you know continue on in life. Like being partially in fifth, as I was told, like partially in fifth density. Whatever that did to me was very. It felt like a hallucination, like I said, and I never really felt the same my entire life afterwards. Whatever happened to me at that moment, and I mean, these are beings that live over 3,000 years, so they're big picture kind of
Oh
beings,
yeah. Yeah.
and they see things in the long game. So it's like, I mean, I suffered and it was difficult, but I mean, in a sense, I don't know, in a loop, I guess. I had already volunteered for this program and I was already with them. And the elder ones were able to like go back in time and kind of prepare myself to get ready for what I was about to do. And that's kind of like how I felt it was. And even though it
Mhm.
made like life, like childhood and, young adult life difficult for me, it was something I just had to kind of overcome and adapt to. But yeah, I mean, I think it was most definitely whatever happened that night was most definitely like them,
Mhm.
and it was confirmation with the executive officer who told me that's you know that's what happened. That's why I was stuck in partial fifth density while the chair didn't properly work on me because it happened to me when I was 11. It didn't happen.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
chair was
that's
actually not able
clarifying.
to push me down into third density properly.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So in the Pleiadian contact, was that while you were like in tandem when you're was with Solar Warden? Is that
Yeah, that's why I was when I was with Solar Warden when I got attached to them because I mean like the way it happened was I was establishing myself like in the Dark Fleet, like the German society. I was engaged actually. Like I had asked for my citizenship, they granted it. I was getting everything they wanted. I could do things on the ship. I could manipulate the aura of the ship. Their ship had a consciousness as well. They never saw that before. Certain things that they had never seen before. I could actually make a woman playing the harp or something like that. Like appear on the ship. I could cause things like that to happen, like by manipulating the actual aura of the ship. And so I was establishing myself, and I was kind of like in a sense of like a select. I was on a probationary period to become like a citizen, basically, of their
Mhm.
world. And we went to kind of like a space station, almost like a UN, I guess you would say, for ETs. And I remember the first officer of the Dark Fleet, the ship I was on. He said we're going to meet the beings that we've been in conflict with. So it's not going to happen. But if they attack the master, protect them. The master was like the head reptile of the ship, and because there was always like four reptiles, like the master, and he had like three other ones with him, like on all these Dark Fleet ships.
I was gonna say this is Darkfleet, right? That's totally
Yeah,
Darkfleet.
this is Dark
Yes.
Fleet. Yeah.
Totally Darkfleet. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when I went to the space station, it was like it was a man and a woman came up, and the woman. This is how negotiations really happen with ETs a lot. Male and female means a sense of neutrality. It doesn't mean they're together. It presents like neutrality or negotiation when a
Mhm.
man and a woman's together. And the woman will start off first. She'll kind of be nice. She'll kind of compliment. She'll kind of say, and I could hear them telepathically. They were saying things like, the cargo belongs to us. You know, you took the cargo from us. It rightfully belongs to us. And then the reptile's response was, well, since we invested so much time and energy into this cargo, it now rightfully belongs to us. So then the man came forward and he showed like a smart glass pad and basically gave off articles like, you are now in violations of these articles. That the cargo rightfully belongs to us. If you don't give it back, it'll be considered an act of war. And so, the reptile he read it all. He threw his hands up in the air and he walked away. And then the woman came up to me and said, "You're coming with us now." And that's kind of like how it started for me. Like that's how I got wound up in Solar Warden because it's like the Pleiadians and Solar Warden. It's like a joint task force where it's their technology. They gave Earth the technology to build these large ships, but our resources, like our titanium, our gold, things like that, to actually build the ships. And but they could commandeer the ship at any time for any reason with no questions asked, and that only happened once. But that was like kind of part of the deal that they gave to Earth as far as
Okay, you mean between the Pleiadians and Earth government?
Yeah, and Earth government working together. Like that was part of their deal, and that's kind of like how Solar Warden, as far as I remember, the way it worked out, how it happened.
Hmm. 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 So, mm, I'm just parsing this out in my 3D mind, which isn't always that useful to try and make it linear. Um, but the where you ended up with the Pleiadian interactions and in fact a lot of Pleiadian children and family relationships with the Pleiadians was that through the auspices of Solar Warden or was that while you were with the Dark Fleet?
That was through Solar Warden, and I
Okay.
remember I asked Robert why they liked me so much, and he said you could talk to the children.
Oh, uh-huh.
And he said that the children speak a kind of pig Latin, or it's kind of baby babble with a few words here and there until they're about 6 years old. And the adults can't understand it. And he said, but you could understand it. And,
Yeah.
I asked him to do it. And he was, like, I don't want to do it. I said, we'll do it. And he said, well, it sounds kind of like first we went to the apakataka and then over to the abadada. So it's like words here and there. It's like 80% emotion and like 20%.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
usually telepathy is about 50-50, but with like the kids, it was like 80-20.
Hmm.
And he said that that meant I was something called an empathic telepath, where I didn't need to know the language of a people or their culture or anything about them. I could just communicate with them. And other beings can't do that. And I was told there was like 4 or 5 of us in the universe that have this ability of like they call it empathic telepaths, to where you could just, and that was like why they first thought I was, different, and yeah, why they wanted me to have so many children with them, because it was something they wanted in their DNA, whatever that was, whatever I could do, they wanted that like part of it. And he
Yeah.
also kind of explained to me that third and fourth density beings see fifth density beings as naive, because fifth density beings kind of have a policy where if this is mutually like benefitful for both of us, why would you ever betray us? Like they don't really have that concept.
Yeah.
And they kind of wanted more like, more of a common sense kind of streetwise kind of bred into them, because they had been taken advantage of by the reptilians many times.
Yes.
It's something they couldn't get past because they have this kind of naivety about them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you have many Pleiadian children or hybrid children out there. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that would be well, how is that for you? Yeah.
I mean, it's sad, but it's something, and you know, I don't really channel them. I don't talk to them. At least not
Mhm.
that I know of. I mean, I have thoughts maybe it's them, but then I kind of second guess myself. But then I was taught by them not to second guess yourself. Like stop second guessing yourself and just go with your first gut
Yes,
feeling.
go with your first impression. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100%, and I'm a type of person where I don't know. I was raised pretty blue collared, even though my father could do these things, taught me how to do these things, and I'm more of like an evidence kind of person. I would like some sort of physical evidence, but
Yeah.
I mean, the way space works, the way it works itself, the way, and I don't remember 100% all of that, but I mean, as far as what Robert was telling me, he was like, there's beings walking around you all the time right now, like going into portals, going in and out of portals. And we talked about earlier in the last interview we did together, it was about the Miami Mall. What I thought that was, and I thought that that was fourth density. I thought that part of the mall kind of went into fourth density for a moment. Fourth density is like spirit world, astral plane. So all
Mhm.
these people in the
Yeah.
mall, they started seeing these shadow beings walking through portals, what looked like circles, and
Totally. That was in the news, right? That was in the
yeah,
news.
that was in the news. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that happens as far as what he told me. That happens all the time. Like they're all around us, and they can see us if they want, but they're not really that interested in us. But like,
Yeah.
so space isn't what you think. I mean, there are ships and there are beings that live further away, but it's not as big as you think. It's more or less just layers of like density,
Yes,
and
that's how
that
I
are stacked
experience
on
it
top of each
too.
other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, sometimes I can be interfacing with a few different beings, let's say at once, or groups at once, but they're all in different density things. It's not like they're all standing there side by side in one little it's hard to explain in linear terms, but I think that's what we're getting at.
But we're all kind of sharing the same space, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And even in
Hmm.
the programs, they're like, like when I was first introduced to it, yeah, there's Germans up there. And I said, you mean like in space? And they're like, it's kind of like that. Like they don't, it's not really like what you think of, just emptiness space. It's more like layers, stacks. Some of them live further away, so yes, you need craft. but there's a lot just living around, sharing the same space, if that's what you want to call it, with us, but just at different levels of
Yeah,
density. Like, and even
yeah.
density itself is difficult to explain on a third density world.
Totally, 100,000%. Every time we get to the limits of linear language to describe and really give a lot of coherent detail to all this is tough. Do you feel like there's still German civilization on the moon now?
Well, Robert told me that it was freed. He
Mm.
said it. He said it'll eventually be freed. He said that it was in my timeline. I didn't help. I didn't assist in freeing the moon, but he said that you helped them. Like I remember, I came there and I recruited a bunch into Solar Warden, into our cause to free the Earth. But I also encouraged them to be like more family orientated and less because there was like brothels there too, and that was your only motivation to work when you were in the mines and everything. And I kind of encourage them, like the men to kind of take care of their children, like more of a family kind of atmosphere. And he said you helped them like that. But yeah, he said that the moon was freed. And, but then again, I mean, when I was getting out, I talked to a lieutenant who was the doctor of the base. And Robert told me that he was an off world German. And there were many people, they called them off world Germans that were like the S3. There was like a chief with a mustache, and he was an off-world German. There were many of them. A first-class petty officer was an off-world German. So I went to go see him for my last physical, checking out of the military. And right away, he started speaking to me, telepathically, and he said, I wasn't a part of what happened, talking about like torture and
Yeah.
and he wanted to make that clear. And I called. I said something like, "A spy is still a spy," and he's like, "You don't understand. We won the war. Like he's like, we won. Like you
Yeah.
may have won you won the battle, but we won the war." Is kind of how he said it. He's like,
Hmm.
"So I'm not a spy. I'm just like in the U.S. Navy. I'm connected to this off-world German society, but we beat you. We defeated you in World War II. Like it took a little bit longer. It took till the 50s, but we defeated you."
Hmm.
And yeah, he said that, we're helping you. He's like, do you know we're helping you? And to me, it felt like, I don't know if it was, they were a breakaway from the Dark Fleet themselves or the Draconians, or if part of them broke away or if all of them broke away. But it seemed like he
Hmm.
seemed to be telling me that it was actually the off-world Germans were doing a lot as far as freeing Earth.
Hmm.
And that was like a big part, the Dark Fleet, whatever you want to call it. So like nothing's a monolith. You really can't think of it like that, and nothing is black and white either.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yes, thanks for bringing that point to bear here. Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. And then as far as being on the ship, I mean, is that we got Mars in here too. I know we're just jumping all over the place, but how does Mars kind of fit into to, there's the moon and then you're, being the captain of the ship. What Tell us about a little bit about Mars. What
Well, Mars, as far as what I remember, I was doing primarily was I was trying to get like mantises, and mantises are very good at DNA manipulation.
Excellent at DNA manipulation. Yes.
Yes, and that's like everything kind of has a clique, like a niche in the universe, and that's like their niche. And my primary task was everything's kind of pretty much been invented in the universe, but you can always get better. You can always kind of improve on things, and the mantises are very good at improving DNA. They can make improvements that technology already exists to improve your DNA while you're in the womb. Genetically augmented in the womb is what they call it. They can surpass what other ETs can do. So the reptiles, a lot of times, they had us just track these mantises down, take them alive, and so that they could basically kind of scan their minds and figure out what they knew about different kind of
Yeah.
interrogate them in a way about different
Mm,
DNA manipulation. That was like
mm.
their biggest thing I could remember was they were the reptiles weren't good at the reptiles are kind of like I don't know, they're like underhanded and they're sneaky because they're in the astral plane, they're in the spirit world, but they're really not good inventors. So they'll basically kidnap others, steal others' technology, and use that, and that's kind of like how they work. So that was like a big part of what I was doing. I was tracking down these mantises for the reptiles to interrogate them to figure out what they knew about the advancements in DNA manipulation.
Mm. And when you say reptilians, do you mean the Draco?
Draco, yeah, they
Mhm.
look kind of like they weren't like I don't remember ever. I mean, memory could be there, but as far as like the giant ones, I don't remember that. They were a little bit shorter than us.
Mhm.
They were kind of black, dark colored. It was weird. It's a fourth density thing. We were in fifth, and they were the density chamber that I was put in is reptilian technology. That was one of the few things they invented because they wanted. He explained to me that third density beings, which is what we are, have the ability to naturally go up one density through meditation and study and discipline. We can go into the astral plane,
Mhm.
so we can go up one density naturally. Fourth density beings don't have that ability. So they created a density chamber to go up in the fifth density artificially, because that's kind of like where the movers and shakers are in the universe. You're kind of like in the middle, and that's where they wanted to be. You can't really go any higher than that artificially, but they invented a technology to go up into fifth, and that's kind of like what I remember about the reptiles. They look kind of like the Skeksis almost from the Dark Crystals, I would say.
Oh
They
yeah.
have a robe and
Yes.
drug behind them. They kind of like, I guess, was concealing a tail. They kind of have like a long kind of crocodile, like reptilian kind of snout, muzzle. So they look kind of like, yeah, they look almost like a Skeksis almost. It's kind of like what it reminded me of. And if you look at the original footage, the test footage in Jim Henson's backyard for that movie Dark Crystal, he originally made like a reptilian kind of looking being, less vulture looking and more
Wow.
reptilian. But he test footage said it was too scary for children, so they turned it to like a buzzard. So like,
I remember watching the Dark Crystal, so I had just come back from the SSP, the in 1982 when that movie was released, and I watched it, I couldn't get enough of it. I would go into the theater and just be like, I'm 10 years old and I'm like in a comatose state watching the Skeksis and they're draining the life force out of, what is their name, Kira. It's like almost a scene of getting adrenochrome, not quite, but that's what, I had all these memories that I couldn't quite put my finger on because memories weren't really coherent and clear at that point. But anyway, the Dark Crystal is very redolent for me as well. Okay, thank you for that.
and I call that soft disclosure in the sense that
Yeah.
I was told that they put real things into our movies and culture, like
Hmm.
actual things. So it's almost it's like a way for, oh, you got that from a movie, or that's just in a movie, and it's
That's
also
just a
like,
sci-fi thing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's also a kind of a way for them to release their negative karma, I guess you would say, what the cabal is doing, whatever you want to call them, the Satanists, or what the negative aspect of Earth. Because it's like kind of like we're letting them know what we're doing. We're letting them know what's out there. We're letting them know, but it's like they're not doing anything about it. So it's almost like a karmic, because there is like a karmic retribution for doing negative things, and they have different ways of kind of bypassing it, finding loopholes.
Yes,
Like the
absolutely.
Georgia Guidestones, we plan on lowering the population of Earth to 500 million. And it's like we're letting them know what we're doing, but they're not doing anything to stop us. So it's kind of like that's the mentality of like that negative aspect of the universe itself. They have to let you know what they're doing.
All right, it's right there in plain sight, but we're kind of we
We're
become
blind.
those little we've been cast under a spell, like those little drone grays that we're talking about. Can't quite get out of it. So much here, Daryl. So, oh my gosh. I'm wondering too with oh gosh, so many places I could go. Um, do you remember particular missions? If we talk about Solar Warden and, your position on the ship and things that you were, skirmishes you might have had or things you were looking out for, patrolling around. Any details on that you remember?
I mean, as far as skirmishes, I remember, yeah, like getting into a skirmish with the Draconian Empire through the ships themselves. And I remember like the warfare, what I remember how it worked was the shields are much too powerful to knock down. So I mean, like you can knock down the shields of smaller craft, but as far as starships, you can't knock them down with just weapons. So it's actually kind of like your shield is sending out like a pulse, and when
Hmm.
that pulse is being sent out, your shields are kind of frequency hopping on different frequencies. They're changing frequencies much faster than any kind of technology we have on Earth. And what you're doing is when you send out that pulse of your shield, you're trying to match the frequency of their shields. And if you can match the frequency of their shield, it'll knock it down. So it's almost like hacking. It's like, and that's why they
Yes.
needed the
Yeah.
kind of like the soul in the ship and the AI. It needs to be that advanced for warfare, for combat. And once you actually match their shields and that pulse goes out and it hits their shield, it can knock it down, and then you can disable the ship. Then you can board the ship. And the reason why they board the ship instead of just blowing it up is their ETs are scavengers. There could be more advanced technology that they're not aware of. They want to board the ship. They want to take the ship. There could be people that they know, their consciousness, trapped in this ship. They have ways of trapping consciousness.
Yep.
There could be people who, have tech in their body, the AI in their body, and they're kind of slaves on the ship when they're forced to work for them. They do things like that. So you
Yeah.
want to try to take the ship alive. You don't want to blow the ship up. And then the way they board it, and I remember there was another time where there was like peace being talked about with the Draconian Empire, and we were just kind of like docked. Our ships were docked next to each other. Not really docked, but just kind of there, floating in space. I know they say that space isn't like it's not what you think it is, but in a sense, it's kind of like that. But yeah, it was just the negotiations were going on, and we just came up with the idea of like we should attack them now while their shields are down, because they do it to us. I was the one that would kind of convince them we should attack them now, like while their shields are down, because they do it to us. The only reason they want peace is because they're weakened somehow. And that's the only reason why reptiles would want peace. So we should attack them now. And all of them agreed. And it's actually like kind of like these smaller craft that are kind of cube or rectangular shaped. It's almost like amphibious landings where they'll lock onto the ship, they'll cut through the hulls, they'll blow the hulls down, and you just board the ship and fight like that, like inside the ship. And we did that before. And with the ET tech, the suits we were wearing were meant for more like, they have rail guns, but they're in smaller forms, like in a rifle form. They have plasma, they have laser. You primarily use rail guns though when you're expecting like enemy personnel. And the suits we were wearing were meant for more like, velocity rounds like that, like in the sense of rail, in the sense of laser plasma. So our suits could take that hit. And the Pleiadian like warrior cast behind us, they were wearing like a different kind of like armor suit, body armor. They could handle more of like a hand-to-hand combat, because they actually will go into hand-to-hand combat on ships because they'll be that close to each other. So we would be in front of them, they would be behind us, kind of like holding our shoulders behind us, and we would advance forward. And then once it got to a certain point where we knocked them far enough back in the ship, where we killed enough of them, the Pleiadians were actually, they kind of jumped right over us. Like they're the warrior cats are that strong, and then they kind of hopped off your shoulders, and then they became the front and we became the rear. And then they would fight like hand-to-hand combat.
Hand to hand with Draco?
With Draco, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, so that's something a little chilling. And we have to know that the combat is not just like, don't think of Civil War and like, sticking each other with weapons in a way. I mean, there's so much tech going on in the Draco as I remember them. I mean, I was owned by the Draco out in the Kuiper Belt and was completely a slave for them. And their technology was fucking incredible. So it's so interesting when you're talking about the Pleiadians and you guys going hand to hand with the, neck and neck, head to head with the Draco. So and then what happened?
Well, I mean, we ambushed them. We took them by surprise, and it was over.
Yeah.
And it was that quick. They weren't, because it's like I said, the fifth density beings, they kind of play by the rules. They play by the playbook, while the fourth density beings don't believe that.
Yeah.
They'll play it when it works for them, but they won't. So, and I was telling them, I was like, we should just attack them now, because that's what they would do to us. We should just ambush them. And that's why it worked out. I mean, they weren't prepared at all. They thought we were just there for negotiation.
It sounds like you might have beat them at their own game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember any kind of contraband they were carrying, or any kind of, I mean, I remember when I was in a lot of, there's so much going on with galactic slave trade, and I'm curious, were they carrying anything, or were you guys like checking in on that at all? What was?
Well, yes. I mean, yeah, like they can hold like consciousness in like cubes.
Yeah.
They hold the cubes. They can hold them in something that look like cylinders, almost like urns, but I've seen cubes. And it's like a lot of them were our people, like our people that had conflicts with them, that were trapped. I mean, they could trap a consciousness for pretty much, almost forever, if they want. And a lot of it was for that. That's what most of their warfare is for. And also, as I said, technology. So it was tech they could pick up, and I don't think they had any kind of like, I don't remember any slaves on this ship in a sense, but slaves in the sense of the soul
The
were
soul. I
captured
mean, that's where it's at.
and
Yeah.
used for different technology and everything else that was trapped, and different kinds of
Yeah. Well, so when I was on Mars, as I was out in patrol, out in the middle of nowhere, I got kind of involved in a turf war that turned out to be like this whole illicit illegal operation on Mars with it was commandeered by the Draco, basically stealing consciousness in a kind of a contraband sort of thing. Now, the Draco were using the indigenous reptilians on Mars to do the actual on the ground dirty work. My ship was, my small craft, patrol craft was surrounded and, they took me down and trying to get at the consciousness. This is a long story, but just to make the point clear, like I can corroborate what you're talking about, the soul being is soul scalping in a way and being, you could save it forever, put it into the conscious of a ship or another body or whatever you want to do, use it for trade. It's very highly valued. So I appreciate you kind of bringing that up. It very redolent for me. Do you feel like do you have a sense of the status of the Draco at this point in where we are now? The now?
I mean, overall, I would say they're weakened, but they expanded so far, it's going to be hard to push them back to a point where they're not going to be dominant. I would still say they were dominant. They're dominant in the universe, but I would say that they're weakened, especially in our world right now. I would say, and that's kind of like what I'm worried about right now. What I'm seeing and things I was told by the executive officer I would see in the future, and things of that nature. I would say they've pretty much lost control, pretty much, of Earth. But as far as the
Yeah.
universe itself, it's just they've been around for so long. They've established themselves. They're already very technologically advanced, and the youth of this kind of going around of this universe in this life cycle, I guess you would say.
Mm.
But they were already very technologically advanced. But it's just that like I said, they've just established themselves so much. They've conquered so much that it's gonna take a long time to beat them back. But I would say they're weakened. But I
Hmm.
wouldn't say that. I would say they're still the dominant force in the universe.
Hmm. Hmm. I also, as you're speaking, kind of have this sense of if we call it, we talked about karmic resolution or retribution or these things, the resolution of what's being done. And there may be a kind of, how do we say, like a higher energy that could permeate, bringing, as bringing the consciousness of the Draco to a higher plane so that some of this is transmuted into a more favorable result. Just one thing that I'm observing, especially and I don't know if you agree with this, that my observation over time with different races is that so many races have their future is kind of indelibly wed with what goes on for whatever reason here on Earth. They have timelines that are really connected to the ascension of the planet or the lack of ascension of this planet. And so I'm interested in how the raising vibration of human consciousness now affects maybe the result of the Draco or their like grip and their claws on these things and their work with the Cabal and so on. Anyway, something floating through there as you were speaking. Um, yeah. And with Robert, are you in contact with Robert the XO at all at this point? Or
No, no. I mean, even when I left, before I left the office, I said something like before I left, like I'll see you again, and he said, no, you won't. He was kind of he was not good, not doing well as far as this, his mental health. It seemed like to me. He said he had been age regressed 17, 18 times, and he told me that
oh my
after,
God.
yeah, he said after two times that you run the risk of psychological damage.
Yeah.
And he was around 400 years old, and even though he only looked about early 60s, 61, 62, and yeah, he was just kind of, I don't know, fed up. It's kind of like how he fed up with like
Really? Yeah. So Wow. Yeah, then the age regression tech really beats up. I mean, you can only do it so much before the biology just doesn't respond very well or just kind of degrades. Is that your impression as well?
Well, my impression is you could age regress yourself as many times as you want, and your body's going to go back 20 years every time. But it's going to do massive after 40 years, after two times, it's going to do massive. You run the risk of psychological damage, and every time
Hmm.
you do it after that, you run the risk even more of psychological damage. So
Hmm. Hmm.
17, 18 times can actually like drive you insane, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the aspect of cloning? If we get into the age regression, we can also talk about the cloning facet. You were cloned as well. And is that right?
Yeah,
I,
he told me I died on the third day I was on Mars, and that I was a clone. And I kind of went through like a crisis almost in the sense of like, well, why shouldn't I kill myself if I'm a clone? Like, I'm not even the real Daryl. Like, what's the point of this? And he
Mhm.
said they were able to salvage your consciousness. And I said, like, what does that mean? He said, your soul, if that makes you feel any better.
Mm.
And he basically said that, the part that makes, he said, the part that makes you, you, they were able to salvage it and they put it into a clone body that was identical to your original body in every way. And
Mm.
he said, it's still not good for you, though. It's kind of like, I don't know, like making a copy of a copy, like a Xerox of a Xerox. Like it gets lighter every time.
Mhm.
And even things like going into healing tanks, because healing tanks are almost like they're only meant for really extreme injuries,
Yeah.
damage, clinical death, things like that.
Hmm.
And that's almost like a clinical, that's almost like being cloned when you go into a healing tank because it kind of liquefies you and then puts you back together as your
Yeah.
body. Like all the tech that was in your body kind of floats at the bottom of the tank, things like that. They have to reinstall all your tech. But he said things like, going into med beds, you could do that every day if you wanted, and there's no adverse effects. And he said the ETs have to actually go into med beds ever so often because going through portals, going through jumps on ships, jumps, portals, anything
Yeah.
like that, they use them a
Yeah.
lot. It
Yeah.
slightly alters your DNA, and basically, like med beds kind of readjust it the way it should be. So it's something they use at least once a month, like ETs.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I have similar information on that. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Oh, Robert. All right. And so like you're here in a clone body. I mean, that's, I have wondered, sometimes I feel like I still have a clone out there that I get blips from, not doing anything bad, but as a watcher in a way. I can't quite explain that, and nor do I necessarily need to. This is about your experience, but like it kind of mess with your mind, all of this stuff in the aftermath. I mean, exquisitely, in some particular deep valleys of the soul. I mean, I think you've gone through your own psychological distress concerning all of this, I would assume. I mean, is that true?
Well, yeah, I mean, during the conversation I had with him in the office, I kept on going back to that. I was like, yeah, but I'm a clone. Like, what's the point? And he was like, you got to get over that. Like, you know,
You
like
have to
that.
get over that. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like,
That's
I've been
just
age
part of,
regrets like 50 times. It's all good. We're all fine here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's just part of like what we volunteered for. Like, you have to understand that. And I mean, I would say, I don't know, the things he told me, he originally told me that because he wanted me to go back into the chair. He wanted me to get my mind rewiped. That he said that's my mission right now. And I even asked him later on. He told me that if somebody thinks negatively about you, it not only hurts, you know, you, but it hurts the person themselves. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's such thing as, I don't, you know what I mean? You want to put a whammy on someone. I guess like in the universal sense, that kind of works, but it hurts the person more. The person is thinking negatively about the person, so it's
Yeah.
better just like to forgive and forget and all of that. Then, but because you are, and I think a big part of why he wanted me to go into the chair and even admitted to it, he said partially was because he was afraid that this was going to hurt him. This was going to hurt his family. Me, I resented him for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
resented him for getting me into this program. I resented
Mhm.
him for a lot of stuff. And I mean, for me, I'm not a machine. I'm not a robot. I'll forgive him for a sense, and then something will come back, and I'll have anger
Yeah.
and hatred for him again.
Yeah.
And but it's something I've just learned to deal with. And
Mhm.
I know that it's best just to kind of let go and forgive these things because the way he explained it to me, it's actually hurting you more than the other person, more than it is me. Like,
Yeah, yeah, because we're the ones carrying that suffering, that
mm,
like anguish and denser emotional stuff and retribution. So it kind of brings us full circle back to what you were originally saying at the beginning about Robert's guilt, and like when I said, why was he so forthcoming about all this information? Like, yeah, in the chair coming back, that was for how did you get back? Maybe let me say it that way. How do you recall coming back? What's your understanding of that?
well, eventually he just said it's time to go. Like it's time to go home. Like my contract was up, I had to go home. We took a smaller craft. It was I think it was just like a kind of a blocky looking craft, and he said that that's how you go back in time when you're going through the space program. It's whenever you're coming back to Earth, nearing the speed of light, you can manipulate time. I don't believe you can actually go the speed of light or beyond the speed of light, but there are jumps and things like that to where you can get to a further area a lot quicker. In the very beginning of the program, I asked him like, well, how long would it take to get, to the end of the universe? I asked him if it was ever growing like Einstein said, at the speed of light. And he said, no, it stops. And he said, well, I said, well, how long would it take to get to the end of the universe from Earth? And he said 7 or 8 years. And then he said, with the proper amount of jumps, about 15 minutes. And he mentioned nearing the speed of light. He said that phrase. He didn't say the speed of light. And yeah, so you go back in time on the ship itself, nearing the speed of light. And yeah, and then we went back to the moon, went through a portal, and I was back. And I mean, I had my head shaved, I had my beard shaved, I had a beard, I had long hair. I remember like waking up from the program in the barracks when after they wiped my mind and everything. I didn't remember everything immediately at first. It just, I had only gotten a haircut probably 4 days ago, but then it looked like somebody like shaved my head with like a number 2 or number 3 guard, like a kid cut my hair. Like, in the military, you have it skinned and it fades up to a longer hair at the top. But it was just like somebody shaved, like buzzed my head. And I had like a lot of thick beard stubble and everything else. And I noticed like, burnt hair in my body, and I had clay on the tops of my feet. And I had all these weird kind of, what the hell,
Right. What even happened to me? This is
yeah,
messed
like I
up.
just got a haircut. And I remember being at the barber on base, and he was British, and he said like, didn't you just get a haircut? And I said, yeah. Like, isn't that weird?
Whoa. Yeah. But dude, I've been gone 20 years. It's a really long story.
Yeah, it was really strange. Like the whole coming back was very bizarre, and people were saying
Oh,
things to me in the barracks. People were like saying to me things to me, and the bar on base. So there was all this other confirmation of just not being in the program, but guys taking me aside and like, hey, come in, come into my room for a second. I come into the room. He's like, you joined something called the Secret Space Program, right? Really? And he's like, yeah. And it was just like the guy, and he's like, nobody you work with knows that. And this guy was about to leave the command, so he's just telling me. He's like, nobody, because I worked in the garage. I didn't work in the underground base full time.
right.
And he's like, everybody underground base like knows you joined it, except for those who joined it. So it seemed like there was almost like those who volunteered for it, and then those who didn't. And the ones who didn't kind of kept the eye on the people who volunteered for it to see if they had any memories, to make sure
Yeah.
the command wanted them to keep an eye on these people and ask them questions. So people were asking me all these strange questions, and I didn't understand why. And it
Yeah.
was asking me because the command told them to do that to make sure I didn't have any memories of the program.
And you really didn't much at that point.
I
Wow.
didn't at the beginning. No, not.
Yeah.
I had an overwhelming sense of like depression that lasted for like a long time, probably the entire. I mean, I don't even know. But I
Yeah.
mean, that was really all I could remember, and the physical things that were wrong with me, my haircut, the clay on my feet, things like that.
Wow. And at what point did things start to trickle in? Like what was it years later or months later?
Well, I mean, I had the confirmation because when I was getting out of the Navy, the XO told me all this stuff, but he even said like, you're not going to remember this, because he was looking down my timeline, you could tell. Plus, it's probably a fifth density thing too, where they're better at putting suggestion into your mind. I remember they could do things like if they asked you a question, like the Pleiadians, and you kind of said something jokingly back because it was an uncomfortable situation and you didn't want to go into it. So you kind of use humor like I do to kind of bypass it.
Yeah.
They would just look at you and they would ask the question again, but it was almost like they were kind of peering into your soul when
They're
they asked.
looking into your being.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like you were almost like kind of compelled to like kind of tell them like exactly what was wrong
Tell
with
me
you.
the truth serum.
Yeah, it was almost like that. And I think he kind of like did something like that to me when I was getting out. But for me, and I've asked a therapist about like a repressed memories at the VA and things like that. And they say what it is, and it like my memories didn't come back probably till about about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. And I finally was established financially. I finally owned a home. And it was almost like all of the outside world kind of stressors kind of went down for me. So
Yeah.
then it was almost like my subconscious said like, okay, he's ready for this. And
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
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 And it was like, first it was like different abuses as a child. It almost went in order. It was like different things that happened to me as a kid. Then as I got older, that I forgot these repressed memories, and then, oh yeah, I remember having a conversation with like this guy, the executive officer, and he told me all these things, and then I started remembering everything, and then it just became. I would just look out my bedroom window of my bedroom, and I would just kind of stare at my backyard, and I would just kind of like, yeah, this happened to me when I was a kid, and that happened to me, and then oh yeah, I had this conversation with the XO, and he told me all these things, and I forgot all about that. And that's kind
Yeah.
of like how it worked because there'd be no way I'd be able to make it if my mind didn't have the ability to kind of have repressed memories. I don't think. If I was
Mm.
thinking about this for decades on decades, like for 2 decades, and there would be no way I could, 15. It was probably, 16, 17 years after the program to
Yeah.
where I started remembering all these things, and there'd be no way it would have. I wouldn't be able to hold a job. I wouldn't be able to do anything if I was constantly thinking about it. So it changed me.
Absolutely, 100% on that. Yeah, you can't function when you're getting memory back. It like takes over your entire life, and it will ruin anything in its way if you're not quite ready for it. That's my observation working with myself and clients and others. Yeah. So, and I think we both said, you get blips of, more like packages of memory from time to time still. Is that right?
I mean, that's right, but it's just like regular memory in the sense that it's
Yeah.
major events. Like,
Hmm.
if it's
Hmm.
something more mundane, if I'm just on a world and I'm hanging out, or I'm just on a ship being a pilot, not
Yeah.
so much because you don't really create memories from that. It's the big
Yeah.
impactful moments of
Mhm.
your life that where you create memories,
Right.
and
The
that's kind of
biggest
like
emotion creates the biggest charge, and that's what gets embedded in our conscious and subconscious. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So
Mm. Do you have a sense about, we're talking about looking glass technology and, looking at the forward movement here. I mean, do you have a sense of any, near future events or, anything with the new presidency and Trump's election or anything like this? Do you have senses around that, Daryl, or?
well, he told me he told me a lot. Like before, we were in the office for over an hour. He told me a lot, and
Mhm.
he was just kind of letting me know. He said, like I was going to say earlier, he said, "You think I look like Mike Pence?" He said, "You're right." He comes from my timeline. He said, but we were able to change that timeline because we weren't able to get past fifth density. He said, if a world doesn't keep evolving, it dies. So if the people can't get past, like he said, we got to fifth, but we couldn't go any further, so we had to rearrange the timeline and fix it. And he said Mike Pence is no good, and he was telling me, he said he was trying to go back in time to try to stop his mission, but his mission was successful. He
Mm.
said his mother and father were gone, his brothers and sisters were gone, and then I asked, like, well, how are you still here? And he said, I don't know. But he said one of the first things you're going to see, and I got out in 2006, and this happened in 2007. He said you're going to see Trump is going to beat up Vince McMahon on WWE, and he said that's like a call to the military saying that it's starting. He said that's like kind of like when it started. Like Trump has agreed to this. He said that Trump is just kind of like a figurehead. That it's actually the positive people in the military, the people who didn't want to see their kids as slaves, and they were tired of this, what's going on in the world. They were tired of all these negative aspects. He said that, you know, they tried during like Bush Senior. They got caught. They had to wait 10 years to kind of let everything cool down. They tried again. They got caught. They had to wait 10 years to let everything cool down. So I think this is the third or fourth try, and he said it's going to be successful. But he basically, like, he was just telling me things like, medbed technology is going to become available to the public. Our original timeline wound up with like nuclear war, and just, it was going to be horrible. We were going to get to a nuclear war with China that was intended to be lost because they felt like the Second Amendment, it would take too long to conquer the United States because too many people were armed. He told me Russia's going to be the next world power. He said China's going to be the next economic power. They couldn't agree on who was going to become the next world power, so they almost got into a war with that, so they used natural resources. So since Russia has the most natural resources, everybody agreed that they would become the next world power. You're in Alaska, right? He said Alaska's going back to Russia, but he said that you'll be allowed to stay there. You'll just have to be bilingual. You'll have to learn how to speak Russian. But yeah,
Alaska's like so out of sight, out of mind. We could belong to Russia for a few years. No one would even know. You look at a map of the US, is Alaska on there? No.
But he says it's going back. Yeah, he says it belongs to them, so it's theirs. Yeah. He said like the contracts, he said a lot of the everything after the 1871 Corporate Constitution Act is null and void. We're going back to a constitutional republic. He said the United States has been a corporation since 1871. And anything that was signed it's just going to be thrown away. Like it's just like it's non-existent. Like we're just starting back from like 1870, and like we're starting back from there. And he said like all the world's gold is in the catacombs of the Vatican. Who was it? It was Caesar that was the Library of Alexandria. He said before he burned down the Library of Alexandria, he took all the scrolls, all the tablets, all the books out. It's all in the catacombs of the Vatican. He said that history isn't real. Like our history is completely a fake. That we're the descendants of the Atlanteans. We're going to discover this once we get all these different scrolls that came from the Library of Alexandria. He said that most diseases actually comes from parasites, cancer, and things like that. So that's why they were fighting the ivermectin thing so much, is because parasites cause almost all these diseases that we have. But he said it's just, it's going to be much better. We are still going to rely off a currency system. I asked him if we would make it to fifth density, and he would just smile. He didn't talk about it. All of the actors, you're hearing this with all these, what is it? Is it P. Diddy? Is that the guy who got caught right now with the scandal, the mansions? Was that
Oh, I'm a little behind on that. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, this musician who just got caught, and he had all these parties and everything, and the Obamas were there and the Clintons were there. You're going to find out these people were no good. You're going to find out.
I have a feeling there's going to be quite a bit of unveiling about.
Yeah, and you're going to find out that all your heroes, all these people, musicians, actors, none of them are any good. And he told me that. But he said like it's going to become much better. You're going to be able to pay off a house in 4 or 5 years, a brand new car in like 6 months. Everybody's going to be able to take very nice vacations. But he said everybody has to work. Like everybody has to be kind of productive because there's going to be a lot of work to do. But yeah, but he wouldn't mention anything about ascending up to a higher density or anything.
That was going to be my question. Well, did he say anything about the advancement of human consciousness, and are we better positioned now to up-level ourselves collectively and individually than we have been in the past?
He just said you'll have to find out. He just smiled and he didn't want to say. He said you'll have to find out. But he said that, things like childhood disabilities are going to be a thing of the past. Deformities are going to be a thing of the past. Our life expectancy is going to go way up. He told me the off-world Germans live over 800 years, and that's how long we should live. So, I mean, and because of the pollutants and our air and our water and our food, this all causes us to age like dramatically, like a lot faster.
A lot faster. Looking at the Law of One and the raw material, Ra says, humans were designed originally to live for 900 years, but because they failed to spiritually advance, we're stuck at this like sort of 80, 90 year mark, and less than a century for most of us, which is such a ripoff. Like it's a total flash in the pan. So I'm always plugging, spiritual advancement and meditation and these things to get us out of this cesspool. But you must have been mind blown when you were listening to Robert, like going on and on and on about all the shit that's going to go down, and like, whoa, this was years ago. I mean, like 20 years ago or so, right?
Yes. I mean, I mean, he told me like certain things about. I mean, I don't want to get your. I don't. Is this going on Rumble or YouTube?
No,
It's not going on YouTube.
it's
Yeah, I
going
mean,
on
he told me.
YouTube, so yeah.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay, so I can't go too far. But he said, yeah, he just told me about. I don't know. He told me a lot of celebrities, like Tom Cruise was on the base and he was involved with harvesting children. Nobody knew why Tom Cruise was on base, but he told me he was a main distributor. Tom Hanks was the main distributor. Jack White of the White Stripes was the main distributor for the music industry. He told me the song Little Ghost was about the children in the underground bases, like they're pure white, and Little Ghost,
Uh,
the one I fear the most. He's afraid of what people are going to know what he's doing. Can you scare me up some love? Adrenaline, fear,
mhm.
strikes up adrenaline. I thought I was holding her hand, but I was holding a glove. He said they stay in the cages for so long that they're like veal, like the sinuate doesn't connect properly to the skin and muscle. So if you grab them, it feels like you can pull their skin off like a glove. So he said that that's what that song was about, like the children in the underground bases. That's what that song's about. But yeah, I mean, he told me about like it's really bad, like but it's like Trey Parker and Matt Stone from South Park were actually approached by the military because they hate Hollywood. That's why they went in drag and were on acid during the Oscars. He asked me if I remembered that, and I said, yeah. And I follow South Park, and he said that the South Park episode that instead of a K was spelt with a Q. He said that was the military basically gave them the script, and they just kind of put jokes on the side. But he said the military actually approached them. He called it soft disclosure. Again, it's like a way to kind of plant the seed into the subconscious of the people. So when they find this out about actors and celebrities, what they're actually doing, that it won't be as impactful. It's like almost like a subliminal message. They're trying to
Yeah.
kind of impact us subliminally. So, people will lose their minds. And he even said that whenever the people find out what's actually happening. He said that the reason that the Clintons visit Haiti every year
Oh,
is because Hillary Clinton is a high-ranking voodoo witch, and her master is in Haiti, and she's like really bad. He told me about the Frazzle Drip tape before it came out. He said I just saw it like 5 days ago because he time traveled so much. He said I just saw it 5 days ago, and he told me about that, and he said that the Q thing was real in the beginning, but then it would go away for 4 or 5 months and come back. And then that's not real, but it doesn't matter because it's already started by them. And then that's how he kind of like put it to me. Like, yeah, it's real in the beginning, but then it goes away and comes back.
yeah. Yeah. So much here, Daryl James. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Now, as far as, but all he would do is smile as far as ascension. He would just say, you have to find out. You have to find out for yourself.
we
But
have
he
to
would,
find out for ourselves in a way. Isn't
yeah,
that the truth of the
yeah.
statement? Well, so, and for you at the soul level, I mean, do you, maybe I touched on this at the beginning, like, is this all part of the destiny of the one we're talking to as Daryl? Do you have a higher understanding of all this at the soul level? Like for me, when I came to that realization, it allowed me to metabolize and heal a lot to kind of get the really big picture. So I wonder if you kind of have a sense of that yourself.
I mean, I have a higher sense in the sense that, when I first joined the program, he said, he had an attitude of like, those people don't know anything. Like these people out here, like they don't know how the universe works. I can show you how the universe works. Would you like to know how the universe works? That's kind of like how he presented it to me. So I guess in that sense, yes, I would call it more of like a higher spiritual level in that sense. Where,
Mhm.
but I mean, at the same time, it could be kind of, isolating. It can ostracize you from society because it's like it's really a lot different than people truly understand. And I've told close friends and I've told family members,
Oh, you have. Wow. Yeah.
about my experience and things like that. And
Mhm.
I mean, they can either say you should write a book or they can either just completely, ignore you and, act like they don't know you any longer. I mean,
Exactly.
those are my
Yeah.
experiences with it.
Yeah, I agree.
But
Very much
yeah,
so. Yeah. I'm always very careful what I say to who, and maybe that time actually is really ending for me because it's not time for holding this out anymore with anyone for, like on my personal journey, it's time to just reveal everything, no matter if I feel like they can understand it or not. So I'm hopeful about what's happening for us individually and collectively moving forward. That's usually my stance. But anything else you want to leave us with today? Anything else you wanted to to share?
Well, I mean, just myself, he was almost in tears when he was talking about the future, as far as even in my own lifetime, about as far as how proud as he was. And
Yeah.
he had sacrificed a lot. He'd sacrificed his family, and he told me, he was genetically engineered in the womb to be able to handle that kind of remorse of sacrificing,
Wow.
make sure that the
Yeah.
earth
Yeah.
continue on.
I wish I could get Robert on the show. Really would like to talk to Robert. Robert, where are you? So, I mean, do you think he's still alive?
Well, I mean, in some sense, I guess, considering he time traveled so much.
Right?
But I mean, as far as I don't know, he didn't seem like he didn't want to continue on much further, as
Yeah.
far as 400 years of
Mhm.
existence were concerned.
Mm.
But I mean, it's just that I mean, I wouldn't give up hope. I think we're coming into a good time. I think we're
Yeah.
coming into the cut. This is going to be written about in history books for a
Mhm.
thousand years. He told me about 1,000 years of peace and beyond. He said that's what we're looking at right
Yeah.
now. And
Yeah.
the populations will be moved. There will be some conflict, but it won't just be like any kind of like garbage conflict just for in the name of oil and in the name of money and in the name of lowering populations, like all of our conflicts have been before. But he said, like, borders will be changed, populations will be moved, things like that. But he said it's going to be much better than what we originally had in store for us in our timeline.
Mhm.
And, so it's not going to be just immediate peace, but it's going to be so much better. He said it, to me. And
Mhm.
I would just say, look at it like that, in my opinion. Just, you're living in a very historical moment in our world and, the earth itself. Like, and
Yeah.
you're a part of that right now. And I mean, it's difficult. And he told me it has to be difficult in a sense because it has to affect our DNA memory. He said we have DNA memory. So, just to make sure that this will never happen again. We'll never allow our politicians to take advantage of us again. So we have to go through like a long kind of birthing process, and it's going to be difficult. But this
Yeah.
is supposed to happen in my lifetime, as far as us finding out about our true history, getting all this advanced medical technology to where you won't have to deal with loved ones passing away from cancer and things that could be easily like stopped. The ETs, they see us as like strange because we don't have things like med beds, and it's just such an everyday technology for them.
It's such a normal, like, yeah, it's so commonplace. So, yeah,
It is,
absolutely. Well, thank
and
you
that's
for
coming
giving
to
us
us. I
the,
would say, yeah, that's coming to us soon, and I would say,
mm,
be hopeful. Be
yeah.
hopeful.
Yeah, I think you and I are both on that page of hope and inspiration for humanity. I really appreciate you reflecting that back here today. And Daryl, do you have any public speaking engagements coming up where people can
Well, I mean,
meet
I'm
you
going to the
or
Journey to Truth conference. That's the next. I
okay.
doing this a lot. I like interacting more with the host like this.
Yeah.
Talking about my story is just like bizarre, like psychotherapy in front of a bunch of strangers. And
Right.
and it's difficult for me, especially in front of a crowd. But yeah, I'm going to Grafton, Illinois,
Mhm.
Rebels of Disclosure, and May 5th is when it starts of
Mm.
next year. So that's when the
Okay.
next one I'm doing.
Awesome. And you're a speaker there, I think, right?
I'm a speaker there as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And where can people can get a hold of you at daryljames.com? Is that your website?
Daryl D James, Daryl D is in Delta, James.com. So Daryl D James.
Okay. And I will link that below for folks who may want to connect and follow up with you. Maybe this strikes a chord and some of our viewers let us know in the comments. And if you want to book a session with me one-on-one or join a course, I offer lots of things through my website, readings, quantum healing, inner child work, starseed coaching, galactic attunements, astral journeys, past life readings, and so much more. You can get on my mailing list also below if you want to know more about webinars and things coming up with me. And that's all linked below. Daryl James, super honored to have you, and I hope you'll come back.
Of
Thanks so
course,
much,
yes.
everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Just to mention this briefly, I have a mother and father from a previous lifetime, Indigenous mother and father, and I just call them simply mother and father. They've been with me every day for about 2.5 years. They were my parents from a previous lifetime with the Crow people. And they've helped me heal so much. They've done soul retrieval work for me. They helped me journey to get parts back. And that's actually ongoing. Like even today, I was working with them this morning. And their love is so beautifully unconditional.